Hello guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. Alright, let us begin on this new fanfiction story, Tensura, of Bonds and Demon Lords by Ryagful. Chapter 1. Birth of a Nation and Demon Lord Tea Party. In a certain world inhabited by various magical races, there were two important meetings taking place that would change the fate of the world forever. One of these meetings was taking place in the territory of the Lizardmen near Lake Shisu. And in that meetings, the Jura Forest Alliance was born, and the slime known as Rimuru Tempest had just been declared its chancellor by its members. Now Rimuru saw sitting there in his slime form, wondering, how the heck did this happen? In a slight panic that he would never let anyone about, thank God slimes have no expressions, he though, and recalled the events that led him to this place. It all started a few months earlier, in another world. There, he was just some guy in Japan named Satoru Mikami. No one important, really. Kinda a loser in his personal opinion, what with being single and a virgin his entire life. Even so, he was relatively content and easygoing, until one day he was murdered by some thief in broad daylight while protecting his junior. But death, as it turned out, was not the end. And shortly after dying he was reincarnated in another world, this one as a slime of all things. Furthermore, he had acquired some unique powers or skills, as they were known for his trouble. These were Predator and Great Sage. Great Sage in particular was an incredible source of information and allowed him to quickly adapt and use his newfound powers to the fullest. Shortly after reincarnating, or a really long time, it was hard to tell when you had no eyes or sense organs, he met with the main inhabitant of the cave he was reborn in. The storm dragon Veldora, one of the mightiest beings in this world, who just happened to be imprisoned there. Long story short, the two become fast friends, and eventually the dragon gave him a new name, a monster name, Rimuru Tempest. The newly named Rimuru then swallowed Veldora whole, magic prison and all, with Predator inside his stomach dimension. He would be able to analyze the infinite prison with Great Sage and eventually free him, but that was a long way from completing. So he moved on, eventually escaping the cave and absorbing the powers of various monsters he consumed along the way and emerging in a great forest. Things proceeded quickly after that. Turns out, he had become quite powerful in his short time in the cave, and was quickly approached by a nearby village of lowly goblins for help. Never one to turn down pathetic pleas of help, he agreed, and dispatched the direwolves that were harassing the goblins, becoming the master of both. He went on a journey to the dwarven kingdom bordering the forest in the hope of acquiring some expertise in building and stuff, only to nearly find himself thrown into prison thanks to some sketchy bureaucrat. Thank God for level-headed kings, King Gazel Dwargo in this case, who only banished him and his new dwarf friends. They barely got to building up the former goblin, now hobgoblin village before a meeting with a group of adventurers quickly went south when one of them, a woman named Shizu Izawa, an otherworlder like him, lost control of the fire spirit she was bound to. Though Rimuru managed to subdue the fire spirit, Shizu lost her life, but not before requesting Rimuru to consume her and take up her burdens, which he agreed to. In the process he acquired a human form, though a fairly small and girly one. He couldn't complain though, as he finally had a sense of taste and better combat coordination, which he decidedly needed, as not long after a group of ogres accosted the goblin patrols and himself, though a quick display of his power quickly diffused the situation. The ogres were apparently the sole survivors of an ogre tribe which had been wiped out by an army of orcs, and since they had no place to go they became Rimuru's newest subordinates. Then the dryads, the guardians of the forest, came by and informed them that a massive horde of orcs under the control of a mythical Orc Lord was moving through the forests, and their leader Trainee personally requested Rimuru to lead the efforts in defeating them. In that regard, they attempted an alliance with the Lizardmen of Lake Shisu, but unfortunately things didn't go too well, in no small part due to Gabiru, the idiot son of the Lizardmen chief, who nearly got all his people killed. Fortunately for the Lizardmen in the forests, Rimuru and his ogre subordinates proved more than enough to stop the advancing orcs dead in their track, and Rimuru personally took the Orc Lord Geld in combat, devouring him and allowing him to rest in peace, freeing the other orcs from his spell. And in the aftermath, this conference was hastily assembled, to decide what to do with the rest of the orcs. As it turned out, they were quite literally starving as a devastating famine swept through their former land. Geld, their king, was desperate enough to accept the offer of a Majin named Gelmid to save his people, becoming the Orc Lord. Despite the damage done by the rampaging orcs, the other races decided to assist them nonetheless, in large part due to Rimuru. In the process, and under the lead of Trainee, the goblins, orcs, lizardmen and dryads united under the banner of Rimuru. And now they were all bowing to him. Chancellor. Me? He shouted internally, hang on. Why isn't Trainee the Chancellor? And why is she bowing to me too now? Aw crap, too late to back down now. Well, I guess that's that then. Nice to be working with you folks, he said sheepishly before mentally kicking himself for such a lame speech. The others certainly didn't seem to think it was lame as they all shouted, yes sir, vigorously. Then he screamed, internally of course, at the though that, now that he had accepted the orcs into his ranks, he would have to give them names. All 150,000 of them. I just want to turn into cold sweat and evaporate into nothing. Around the same time as the meeting in the Lizardmen cave were taking place, a different but no less influential hangout was underway. In the distant land of the puppet state of Gistov, in the palace of its king, Demon Lord Clayman, together with 3 other members of the 10 great demon lords, the most powerful group in the world. This group had to some extent or another supported the Majin Gelmid in his plan to turn the Orc King into an Orc Lord and Gelmid Hop allow him to ascend to true Demon Lord status. This was not to be, however, as the allies in the Jura forest put a stop to Gelmid and his plans. Gelmid himself had assembled, at great risk to himself, this group of demon lords, all of which bordered the forests to the south and east, and they were not happy with him, especially when an unknown army attacked the orcs. Under pressure, Gelmid hastily left to the battlefield, only to get beat up by a strange masked Majin and then devoured by his own creation. The demon lords watched the events unfold through a crystal ball that was linked to Gelmud's vision, but of course his death meant the images were cut. This did not suit well with one of them in particular. That moron Gelmid. The young-looking girl shouted, eaten by his own monster. It'd be funny if we didn't lose our eyes. The girl was Milim Nava, the destroyer, and possibly the most dangerous and powerful being in the world, though few would say so based on her appearance. She looked 13 or 14 at best, pink hair tied in 2 long tails and wearing a scowl on her face worthy of any tantrum-throwing teen. Sighting around a tea table were the other lords. Clayman, the marionette master, a thin, sharply dressed man with an air of nobility about him. Frey, the Sky Queen of Fulbrosia, an extremely attractive woman with large white wings and bird-like talons for feet that radiated fines. And Carrion, the Beast King of Eurazania, a large man with beastly features that looked every part the warrior king he was. Next to them, the scantily clad Milim stood out even without her relatively tiny stature. But none of the others were fooled. She was the oldest in the room by far, an ancient demon lord that had been around since before the Great Tenma Wars and which held the nickname the Destroyer for a reason. Few even among the demon lords dared to get on her bad side. Gelmid was a fool, no doubt. Carrier agreed coming up with this whole scheme and then getting himself killed. Right. Milim shouted between pouting, right, Frey. Milim. How should I known? The older-looking woman answered back. I had almost nothing to do with this until you dragged me here yesterday. Ah, come on, you look like you could use a break, retorted Milim with a smug smile to which Clayman could only feel a sharp pain in his temple. I'm busy though. Unlike you. Clayman. Carrion asked the thin man, what do you think? She's here now. Clayman answered, might as well. Thus the owner of the castle proceeded to catch Frey up to their plan, which concluded with the final images they had saw from Gelmid a few minutes before. His plan might have failed, but we can still try to make the best out of this. He finished, and looked around the room to gauge the intentions of his fellow lords. Frey, though she asked a few questions during his explanation, still looked rather disinterested and distant. He wondered what she was up to. Meanwhile, Carrion simply looked disappointing. Milim paid little to no attention, continually playing back the last records of Gelmud's vision with a strange glitter in her eyes. What's she up to? Milim, for her part, had tuned out much of the conversation. Her attention was firmly on the crystal ball in her hand and the interesting images it showed. She had been momentarily distracted from it by its sudden interruption, but now had little interest in anything else. That masked Majin. Who is he? It's hard to tell from here, she thought as she squinted her eyes to get a better look. Playing the recording over and over a few times, she noticed something weird about the flying, masked figure, though she, even with all her many centuries of experience, could not quite place the feeling down. Her intuition was telling her to investigate, and it pretty much never failed her in the past. With a grin, she turned her attention back to the others. "I can't believe you people," was the last tidbit of conversation Frey had uttered. "Now Frey, it's not as bad as looks," Clayman defended. "Since Gelmid was acting alone, we did not directly interfere in the forest," he finished with a devilish smile. "I'm not sure international treaties would be quite so lenient with your interpretation," Frey said. "In any case, it's over, right?" Carrier asked. "Bored. I mean, without Gelmid the Orc Lord would just be out of control. No use to anyone. We still don't know for sure what happened with the Orc Lord, though," Clayman countered. "It's possible that Majin killed him too, but it's unlikely." "Then let's investigate," Milim shouted, startling them slightly and tossing the crystal ball to the side casually and looking ready to take flight right then and there. "Now Milim, wait a second." Clayman stopped her. "I agree, but let's not be hasty. I would like to wait a bit and send someone else to investigate if the Orc Lord was stopped or not." Why? "Because if he wasn't, there might still be a chance he succeeded in evolving. If that happened, our presence, especially yours, might interfere with that evolution," Clayman explained calmly. Both Carrion and Frey looked at each other and then at the sulking Milim. Usually this was bad news for everyone around, but her expression quickly changed as she thought it over. "Fine." Milim agreed as she casually sat back down on the sofa, hands behind her head. "Send someone over." "Thank you for your patience, Milim." Clayman could practically hear the sigh of relief from the other lords in the room. Placating Milim was not usually an easy task. Milim for her part decided that she could wait a few more days to go investigate this new interesting thing. After all, she was millennia old. A few days or weeks was quite literally nothing to her. Plus, she was certain of the result. There was no way the Orc Lord would win against that Majin, even if he evolved into a Demon Lord. Actually just a Demon Lord seed, but she kept that to herself, so she decided to let the younger generation play their little games for now. But as soon as you get your results, I'm paying them a visit," she proclaimed as she stretched on the sofa, looking ready to take a nap as if she owned the place. "Hold on Milim, there's still the matter of the non-interference treaty we have with the forest," Carrion interjected, but was quickly cut off by her. It doesn't matter anymore, right?" she said casually. Her companions only looked on in slight confusion. "What do you mean, Milim?" Clayman spoke up. You're all younger demon lords, so it's no surprise you don't know this." Milim started, crossing her legs. "Veldora the Storm Dragon is gone." "Yeah. Well, that treaty was only designed so that no attempt, deliberate or by mistake, was made to free him from his prison. With him gone." She let the words hang on for a while and smiled as Clayman had a look of, "Oh," on his face. "The treaty is null and void, is that what you're saying?" he finished while stoking his chin. "Yup," Milim proclaimed triumphantly as the other two in the room dawned to the same conclusion with surprised faces. "Also, to officially scrap the treaty we only need 3 demon lords agreeing on it. We got 4, right here." After a short pause, Carrion spoke up with a small, conspiratorial smile. "In that case, I don't imagine any of the others objecting. I'm all for it." "Me as well," Frey said, absent-mindedly twirling a strand of her hair. "The forest borders my land. It was always a pain to deal with all that." Clayman sighed. "Damn. Milim might look simple-minded, but she's a lot craftier than she lets on." "Oh well, very well, I agree too. I will send news to the other lords, but Milim," he said as she looked over to the girl, now sprayed on his sofa. "I still want you to wait doing anything until we get some news." Yeah, she dismissed with a wave as she picked a pillow. "And you guys will send your underlings after, right? Just as long as we agree not to interfere with each other, it's all good." She then placed the pillow on her face. The others exchanged looks. Frey and Carrion almost felt sorry for Clayman, who looked like he had another headache. "Well, I agree with her," Carrier said as he began walking out. "Let me know what you find." "Yeah Clayman." Then he was off. Frey lingered for a second, looking at the now sleeping figure of Milim with an almost envious look, but Clayman dismissed that as just his imagination. "I'm kinda busy with something. I probably won't send anyone." And she too was off. Clayman stood still for a minute as he looked over at Milim, who was now soundly snoring away on his sofa. Then with another sigh, he turned and left, closing the door behind him. There was no point in trying to chase her away now. Maybe she was doing that deliberately to get back at him for stopping her leave earlier. He wouldn't put it past her. Of course, that was exactly what she was doing.